Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Big Questions, Small Steps. My name is Amanda, and I'm so glad that you could join me today. Today, we're going to talk about something that can make people feel uneasy. We're going to talk about cults, and specifically, we're going to talk about how to know if you're in a cult and what to do if someone you love is in a cult. Now, when I say being in a cult, most people think that would never happen to me. There are no cults around here, things like that. And unfortunately, cult-like mentality is much more prevalent than one might think. Psychology today even considers being in an abusive relationship or being in an addiction similar mindsets to being in a cult. So any of the information that I present in today's video, you could certainly use and apply in those different situations. Again, many people think that cults aren't prevalent today, or it's not going to be a problem, or they're smart enough to not join a cult, but that's simply not true. There are people striving for connection all over. There are very intelligent people who join cults. And we'll talk about why people join a cult in a little bit. But first, let's talk about what a cult is. By definition, a cult is a system or group of people who practice excessive devotion, and that's a key part, excessive devotion to a figure, object, or a belief system. And it's typically led by someone with a lot of charismatic qualities, someone who makes you feel personally obligated to be a part of this, okay? There are four main types of cults. There are the doomsday cults, where the world is going to come to an end, something's going to happen, tragedy is coming, you need to prepare. There is religious cults who have such a close view of what is right or what is holy or what is righteous that it essentially eliminates everything else and says that they are all wrong and they are not to be trusted, that they are the only ones who will survive. That's number two. The third is a political cult. So typically they're raging against authority, raging against the police or the government frequently. And then the fourth is one that many people don't think of, but it's actually a sex cult. So it might be like a prostitution ring would essentially be in that area. There are many cults that will use different types to enhance their society. For example, there was a group called The Family, and that had a religious aspect, a political aspect, as well as a sex aspect. They have different things. The People's Temple with Jim Jones, that had a doomsday component, that had a sex component, that had a religious component, and that had a political component. They have little tidbits of all of them because it makes them stronger. The more types they have, the more invested that cult can be in itself. Okay, so interestingly, in my research, cults typically have a life cycle. Just like a flower or a baby has a life cycle, a certain process, cults do as well. And that was very intriguing for me. So it starts with a big idea. They have an idea that it should be this way or society should be like this. And then step two happens. It's called the love bomb. They share this idea with other people and it spreads like wildfire because people are jumping onto it because it's presenting something that they are missing in their life. The third happens as a result of the second. It's called new life. So because they have this new knowledge, this new hope, they have this new sense of urgency about their life and what they can do with it. Step 4 is growth. Because they have been touched by this new idea, they want to share the news with other people, and so the cult begins to grow. 5 is they develop rites of passage. As all these people are coming into the cult, they want to have a hierarchy system or a way to prove themselves as true members of the cult. So they develop rites of passage. They do. Number 6 would be, and it's a huge one, isolation. In order for a cult to be successful, they need to distance you from the rest of your family and support system. If you have close ties and connections with all of your family and supports that are not part of the cult, you will automatically be drifted or pulled back towards them. And they don't want that. So they will create that isolationism, that there's something wrong with them. You need to distance yourself from them. They're not going to go where you're going, things like that. After they have you isolated, they're going to do what's called hate bonding. They're going to talk about all the things that are wrong with the world, or all the things that they don't like, or attributes that they don't like about society. They're going to bond against, we're not standing for this. It's hate bonding. Okay. After that, they're going to turn everybody else that's not part of their group into a traitor. You become much more negative about outside people from the cult. They aren't as good as you, that anyone could be lying to you. Anyone who from the outside world who tries to be kind to you could actually be trying to deceive you and get you away. And that's not okay. So traitor would be number 8. Number 9, they turn into a witch hunt. So kind of to cull the group that has formed in that cult, they will start to turn each other against another member in a witch hunt to prove how dedicated you are, to re-emphasize that. Okay. After that, then they're going to go into persecution paranoia. So pairing right along with that witch hunt, they're going to constantly be thinking of, oh my goodness, I did this wrong. The leader's going to punish me and I'm going to be disband or whatever. That's how they think. That's how they think. And again, that's very specific because they need you to be afraid of what the leader will say in order to keep you in the cult. Number 11 is there's going to be an attack on your mental, your physical, your spiritual, whatever. And frequently this is an attack on your physical. So you'll be having work sessions where they will work you emotionally, physically until you break, because then you're easier to manipulate. But they will attack. They will attack you because they can't build a collective group if everyone continues to be strong individuals. They need to have broken people so they can meld you into what they want. Interesting, right? And then the 12th is a final conflict. Eventually, with every cult, there is going to be a tipping point where something does not resonate with that individual member. And they are either going to leave the cult or the cult will disband and break apart. But there is going to be a tipping point. The cult is a man-made thing. So there's going to be a tipping point where something doesn't align and there's going to be a final conflict and a final argument that's just going to dissipate it. That's just how it goes. Now, the time period to move through those 12 steps can be weeks, can be days, it can be months or years. There are many groups who have been around for a long time. There are groups that the cult has changed names to kind of morph throughout time. The family, the children's family, God's family, the chosen ones, Heaven's Gate, Waco, Jonestown. There's lots of cults that have morphed throughout time. Jonestown didn't initially go straight to Africa and set up Jonestown. It started as the People's Temple. And it was more about social justice and having everybody join together and build like a harmony where you contribute what you can and you make your society better because you're all in there together. Then they started getting paranoid and they decided, okay, this isn't the place for us. They relocated to Africa, where they were more distant from their loved ones that were outside of the cult. They had less government control. They had more control over what went on in their area. They had more resources than anything that was around them. And they were still paranoid. Every cult will go through those different steps. If you love someone and they happen to be in a cult, they're going to experience those different steps, but it may look different. If you love someone and they're in an abusive relationship, you're going to have very similar steps like that. You're going to have times where they are surrounded in love. You are going to have times where they are pushed to isolate and push away people that they once cared for. You're going to have times where they're going to look at those outside of that abusive relationship as there's something wrong with them. They're trying to attack us. And so they're building that wall higher and higher to prevent them from getting in. If they're in an abusive relationship, they're going to come to a time where they are going to look at that other person and be paranoid about something they're doing or not doing or will do, or if I do this, it will set them off and then this could happen, or I don't want to make this phone call because this might be interpreted. They're going to go through the different process. And it was eye-opening for me when I made that connection between cults and abusive relationships and abusive tendencies or addictive tendencies. It was just interesting to me. But let's keep going. With cults, just like abusive relationships or addictions, nobody ever joins one because they think, hey, I know, I'll get into a cult, or I'll get into an abusive relationship, or, oh, you know what would make today great? Let's get addicted to crack cocaine. Nobody ever thinks that they're going to do that. They tend to think they are too smart for that to happen. But what happens is it happens so slowly that they misread the signs. They're looking to fill some kind of unresolved insecurity within their lives. Maybe they feel like they've been an outsider. Maybe they feel like they just don't belong. Maybe they feel like they're not good enough in themselves and they can't keep playing this fake person game. But if they do this, then they'll experience real love, real acceptance. They're seeking that. So they'll join a cult or an abusive relationship, or they'll start an addiction, not thinking that they're doing it to harm themselves. They're thinking they're doing it to help meet that unresolved need. They're looking for acceptance. Plain and simple. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for acceptance. And that seems to be the biggest factor as to why people join a cult. They're looking for acceptance. They're looking for someone who has a similar idea to them and a place to feel like they are not the only ones, that they are not the one who is broken and everyone else is perfect. Now, once they are in, again, the cult will move through those 12 steps and they won't know that they're in a cult until it's too late, frequently, until they're in deep. Now, if they are in a cult, in an abusive relationship, in an addictive tendency, there are things that they can be aware of that will assist them in their next steps. If you're wondering if you're in an abusive relationship, if you are in a cult, if you are in an addictive relation of some way, whether it's a substance, whether it's an action, there are some things to look for. Typically, in an addiction or a cult, there is a leader, one leader, one person, and that person is the only one who knows the truth. One person is always right. One person has all the power, and the other person or the other people are never good enough. There's always faults that they have. There's always things where they fall short. There's frequently abuse, physical, verbal, emotional, of the one that's not the leader. But the tricky part, the abuse of the other people is not recorded, not documented, because why would you want evidence of that? So there's abuse of the other members. There's also an innate fear of letting down the leader, as well as a fear for those that have left because they are lost and they will never be found. There's a fear that's real for them. There's also a fear of anything related to the unknown, the outside world. There's a fear when they're interacting with people. There's a fear when people bring different ideas. There's a fear that pushes that boundary of isolation. They don't want their family members coming close because they might have love or support that they offer that individual that will draw them back out. They don't want that. There's a lot of fear. There's also a great deal of secrecy regarding finances. There's no financial disclosures or budgets. Jamestown, for example, they don't know exactly how it was funded. They didn't record that. They know that people gave as much as they could and they didn't keep record. Well, they probably did keep record, but they didn't share it with other people. So financial secrecy is a big part of cults. There's also an absolute authority in that leader. But the tricky part, because a leader has to have some authority typically, but this leader has all the authority without any accountability. And if you question that leader's authority or a ruling or any action, you have serious consequences. For example, in the LDS faith, when there were groups that practiced polygamy under Warren Jeffs, when he decided that they needed to marry the children younger, because then they could raise them up more godly, they couldn't say anything about that because that was the leader. And the leader was saying this was from God. They couldn't say anything about it. Even though I can't imagine that anyone thought, hey, yeah, I think marrying a 6-year-old would be a great idea and they can be my new wife. I can't imagine people would say that, but I also wasn't in that situation. The leader has all the power. And when you have such fear and such loyalty to the leader, you can't ask many questions without putting yourself in serious jeopardy. So if you're in a cult or an abusive situation or something like that, and you know this is happening, then what? You can try to get out, but it's going to be tough. Most of the cults that exist, if you try to leave, you are going to have all kinds of things happen to you. You'll be intimidated. There have been groups that will lock people away, that they are crazy and they aren't thinking straight, and they will change things so that you do not have the physical ability to leave. And many of the groups, you have given over so much of your financial security to them that you couldn't leave if you wanted to. How are you going to start over and make a life for yourself when you have no resources to your name? You have no legal rights to anything. It's scary. It's very scary. And because you've isolated anyone who was outside of the group, they may or may not know that you're wanting to get out. So the next portion that we're going to talk about is if you are on the outside and you see someone you love is in an abusive relationship, is in a cult, is demonstrating that they are having addiction tendencies, then what do you do? So this information comes from Psychology Today. Again, those three things, cults, addictive tendencies, and abusive relationships, have a lot of the same mental components. So they have 4 main tips. If you are a loved one that is trying very hard to still be there for that person who's in the cult because you want to get them out, or is in an abusive relationship and you want to get them out, these are the 4 things that you should do. Number 1, first and foremost, is be patient. It is going to take time. In a cult, in an abusive relationship with addictive tendencies, they are adults, most likely, and you cannot force them to do anything. You need to be patient, and it's going to be a slow and steady thing to help them get to that place where they're ready to accept your help. Okay, so be patient first and foremost. The second thing is continue to reach out. Even when they push you away, still send them birthday cards or whatever. Send them letters. Call their phone if they don't have it shut off. Stop by if they can. Be non-pressuring about your presence. Hey, I'd really like to do lunch with you. Are you available on Tuesday? If not, not a big deal. Continually putting yourself out there, as hard as it can be as the outside person, is a lifeline that if someone is ready to leave, will grasp at, because they won't know any different. They won't know of anything else that they could do, okay? Number 3 is you're going to build rapport and trust by continually reaching out. You're going to not talk about why this cult is wrong, or, oh, this leader is doing this, or, oh, he's such a terrible person. You're not doing that. You're talking about things that you have common values on. Maybe you're talking about the kids. Maybe you're talking about weather. Maybe you're talking about memories from when you were younger. You're going to give space. Keep it positive. Keep it light. You're just creating that space. Your presence is building that trust that you are here and you're not going anywhere and you're not a threat to them, okay? And the 4th one is you're going to ask questions, but you're going to ask questions with interest, but not doubt. You're not accusing. You're just genuinely going to ask, oh, so you were doing a reading? Where is that reading? I would really like to read that. Or, oh, he said that this is happening? Huh, I didn't hear that. Okay, I might have to do some research. You're not accusing. You're just making your own questions known to them. You're genuinely interested. So that's what you do. You ask questions. But most importantly, you just need to be there. Be there. Take time. Give them space. The bubble of that cult or that relationship will burst. Your presence, your positive energy will only help that bubble burst sooner. It's tough when you love someone who is in that situation and you can't do anything about where they are, but you can be present and you can be a support person. And you can be the person that when they're ready to make that change, they can reach out to. And that is very powerful stuff. So I hope against hope that you never have anyone in your life that is engaged in a cult or an abusive relationship or has addictive tendencies. But I'm also not naive to the fact that these are things that happen every day in every walk of life. So you likely will have an experience. And now at least you have some ideas of what to look for and how to support them. So cults are not necessarily a fun thing to talk about. And some may wonder, why did I choose to do a topic such as this? It all came about from a conversation that I was having with my amazing boyfriend about different experiences that I've had in different religions and why I disliked some. And I used the term that it felt cult-like. And so he encouraged me to investigate what that means and how do you know if you're in a cult. And as I was doing my research, I started thinking, was I in a cult? Am I in a cult now and I don't know? And the answers that I came to were no, that I'm not in a cult and I wasn't in a cult. But there definitely were behaviors and trends that didn't sit right with me and I didn't know why. I didn't think enough to question what I was supposed to do about it or why it didn't feel right to me. And when I read the research on Psychology Today and it equated being in a cult and an abusive relationship, that hit home to me like none other. Because unfortunately, I have been in abusive relationships. I have been in a physically abusive relationship. I have been in an emotionally abusive relationship. I have been in a verbally abusive relationship. The isolation that you experience in a cult, I definitely felt the same in a relationship. I can remember one of the gentlemen that I was dating actually saying to me at one point, well, what would you say if a family member said this about me? And what if they said this? And telling me like what he expected of me if they say that about him. And he didn't want me to be a part of different family events. He didn't want me to be around any other individuals. He wanted me in the house, and that was it. And he wanted me to always be available when he called, and heaven forbid I'd be busy doing something else. It was jarring when I was doing my research, seeing the comparison. And as someone who was in an abusive relationship, I feel like I am an intelligent person. I never thought that that would be me. And I certainly never thought that I'd be in more than one abusive relationship. When I finally opened my eyes to what was actually happening and I decided to leave, I was scared of what they were going to do. But above all, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I let myself get to this position. I was embarrassed that I didn't see what was going on at the time. I couldn't bear telling my mom and having to see the sadness in her eyes when she saw that I was hurting and that I let myself and her down. I didn't want to embarrass her like that. I didn't want to admit that I had put myself in that position. I didn't want to admit to myself and to others that I was foolish enough to fall for it. I really thought that I was stronger than that. And I wasn't. Someone who is searching to feel accepted will continue to search to feel accepted because they feel like something is wrong within them. And the most gracious thing my mom did was she hugged me and she said, "It's okay, I still love you. I'm sorry this happened and I love you." And I cried more because clearly I'm a crier. But that was the most loving thing ever. Having to tell her was so difficult because I didn't want to admit it. And there are family members today that still don't know all the details, and I don't know that I will tell them all the details because it's something that you don't necessarily need to relive. But it's part of my story and it's part of who I am. And if it can happen to me, I know it can happen to others. So take what I share with a grain of salt, a grain of truth, tuck it away, because you never know when you find yourself in a position or someone you care about in one of these positions. You just never know. And the more we know, the more we grow. Until next time, bye-bye.